Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Every 4 years, we hear the rhetoric that this election is a watershed moment in the history of the country. This election is a crossroads. This election is the most significant, important election in the last 150 years. I have no idea how anybody could claim to actually know that. I don't know that. It may be, but it may not be. But this much I do know. I do know that there's never been a time in my life when I have been, or my aware life, one could argue that when I was 3 years old in 1968 it was like this, but never been a time in my life when election night seems so fraught with danger. There's never been a time when we've had such straightforward, outspoken, direct, and clear threats of violence depending on how the voting goes. There's never been a time in my life when there's been just a month or so out from the election such disagreement about who can vote and how those votes will be counted. People on both sides of the aisle are saying, there's a very good chance that one party could win the election, in one sense, the night of the election, but until the mail-in votes are counted, it's still going to be up in the air. I don't know. My job here isn't to predict the future. My job in this segment, I mentioned this before, I've done a segment like this before. This is segment number 2 of my attempt to give some counsel on voting. As I said, the actual vote is about a month away. And it's my desire to speak into the questions. I believe that these are profoundly moral questions. That is not the same thing as me. I'm going to take time here to tell you who to vote for. I'm not. I have no interest in doing that. But what I do have an interest in helping you grasp is this. Whoever wins the election, whichever part, well, in fact, let me tell it this way. Many years ago, back in 1999, I had the extreme privilege of being asked to give the address at the nominating banquet for the Constitution Party. That is the very evening that the party chose their standard bearer to run for president. I sat on the dais with that candidate, with his vice presidential candidate, who was a hero to me, a gentleman by the name of Joseph Sobran. And I had the opportunity to give the talk, and I stood up and gave my talk. And the theme for the convention was defending the Republic. And I stood up and I said, we've just nominated this man. And over the course of the next year, roughly, he is going to be traveling all across the country, doing radio interviews, getting the word out as far as he can that there is a way for him to win. He's going to make the case that, hey, if this happens and this happens and this happens, if all these stars align, and if you vote for me, I could become the president. It doesn't necessarily have to be a majority. You understand that I believe it was Bill Clinton's first election. He won 43% of the popular vote. And yet, he became president. So I said, he's not going to be able to make the case, though, that he can win with 47% or 43% of the vote. It's not even true that he can win with 51% of the vote. It's not possible for him to be made president by winning a landslide. In fact, if every single eligible voter in America voted for this man, it's still not enough to make him president. The only way for him to become president is if he wins 100% of the vote, keeping in mind that there's only one person eligible. Jesus Christ, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. You need to understand when you go into that voting booth that you are not setting the course for the future. That has already been determined. You are not taking away power or giving power. All you're doing is expressing your own perspective. Now, we have had a huge swath of evangelicals over the course of the past 4 years taking the position that the miraculous victory of Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton, the shock, the amazement, and the shock of how well he's done has been a sign that God is with him and that he's God's man, and yada, 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 yada. And a lot of that's been propped up with the principle that Jesus determines who's president. Well, it's absolutely true that Jesus determines who's president, and he determined that President Obama would be president when he was president. He determined that President Clinton would be president when he was president. In short, what I want you to do is don't give away the peace that Jesus died to give you. Can bad things happen? Absolutely, on either side of the aisle. But nothing can happen that our God has not ordained. Nothing can happen against the decretive will of the one who laid down his life for us. So, friends, if nothing else, walk in, walk out, watch the returns, wake up the next day, wait for the counting of the mail-in votes, and through it all, be at peace. It's time again for another Curating Your Movie Library segment, and unfortunately, again, Lisa is not able to be here. I so enjoy talking with her about the things that we've watched together. In fact, when she's not able to do here, it's my habit to try and talk about something that we haven't seen together, so that when she is here, we can talk about what we have seen together. But she is currently tending to our youngest born granddaughter and our daughter, and so I'm on my own, and I thought it would be a good occasion to give another top 5 list. And this one, maybe Lisa might be unhappy to not be here because it's a genre that she actually enjoys. And what's interesting is it's sort of, I'm describing a very small and narrow genre that is typically part of a broader genre that she's not so interested in. I tend to be more of a science fiction guy than she is, but she and I both love time travel movies. And that is why I am giving today the top 5 time travel movies ever made. And I'm going to start with number 5, and I'm going to choose The Time Machine. Not the more recent remake that, if it didn't star Hugh Jackman, it starred someone who looked like him, but the original Rod Taylor version. This is one of those movies that I remember where I was when I saw it. When I was a teenager, in the summertime, it was my habit to stay up late and to sleep late. And while I'm staying up late, I'm watching the Late Late Show. And on one of those evenings, one of those summer nights, late at night comes on The Time Machine. And the first thing that I noticed is very early on, there was a scene in which Rod Taylor is a young scientist, and he gathers his scientist friends together. And one of those scientist friends is the fellow who plays Mr. French on Family Affair. But I mention it, I put it on this list, not necessarily because it's so great. There's a level of clunkiness to the special effects, but it deserves a place on the list simply because it was the first and the biggest, and it was H.G. Wells, and it was just really fun to watch because in a number of scenes, Taylor is on his time machine and he's traveling through time, and you watch the stuff change where he is. First it's sunsets and sunrises, and then it's seasons and all sorts of things. And it was just, that part was really well done. So number 5 on my list is The Time Machine. Number 4 on my list is The Time Traveler's Wife. Now this is a crossover, and I think crossovers, should really do well. This is both a time travel movie and also a romance. It's about a man who moves through time, and about his wife and their life together. And it's compelling, it's engaging, and it's the kind of thing that probably you would enjoy with your wife, and you both enjoy it. Again, it's like a romantic comedy starring Arnold Schwarzenegger as a SWAT team leader. You get a little bit of everything. Number 3 on my list which is another classic, is Planet of the Apes. That too is one of those moments. I mean, I don't remember. I don't think it was nighttime, but it might have been. But I remember just the stab in the heart. If you haven't seen this, by the way, the original Charlton Heston, Volume 1, not any of the sequels, which are also very good, but this is Charlton Heston Volume 1. The last moment, which is really the first time you discover that it is a time travel movie. Oh my stars. You know what I'm talking about if you saw it. On the beach, with the girl on the horseback. I mean, that was like mind blown. And because of that, it makes our list. Number 2 on my list, another comedy, Groundhog Day. How can you not love Groundhog Day? It's got Bill Murray. It's got Chris, the guy from, he's the son of the famous comedy trio Bob and somebody. Anyway, good quality cast, great story, and just Bill Murray at a really good place. Not sloppy, silly, slapstick Bill Murray, not overly serious, forgot he could do comedy Bill Murray, or has to do highbrow comedy Bill Murray. This is just good comedic Bill Murray. Plus you've got Winter, plus you've got the characters are from Pittsburgh. How great is that? Though they're, of course, in Punxsutawney. And there's a little bit of romance in there for the ladies as well. So Groundhog Day comes in at number 2 on my list. Now, before I get to number 1, which you probably ought to be able to guess, I want to give a list of honorable mentions. These are really good ones that I think are just, again, great movies. One, Lisa and I just watched recently together. I had already seen it. She had not. Safety Not Guaranteed. It's a sort of independent film. It's made by some people who've had success later on, but before they had success. And it's quite intriguing and quirky. Loopers, very high on the list. This is with Josh Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis, and really does a great job dealing with the whole time travel paradox issues. Bill and Ted, I've not seen, by the way, episode number 3, which just recently was released. I'm looking forward to it, but the original Bill and Ted would also be on my honorable mention list. Number 1, gotta be Back to the Future. The first one, of course, as is typically the case when there's a trilogy, it goes 1, 3, 2 in terms of the quality, and 1 is way ahead to 3 and 2 of 3 and 2, and that's the case here. I mean, this was just so classic, so well done, so much fun with playing with the time travel and the paradoxes, just really well done. And so I would commend that to you as well. So that's my list. Top 5 time travel movies. There are others, many others that I've seen, some lower budget, and I tend to enjoy them quite a bit. So check them out. As always, let us know what you thought. If you've seen any of these, if you have some that maybe I haven't seen, I'd love to have in our comments some suggestions for more time travel movies to see, because that's an opportunity for me to get my sci-fi fix and for my dear wife to not have to just merely be patient with me. I have an upcoming segment in our ongoing series on the Westminster Shorter Catechism in which I make the case that the Westminster Larger Catechism is just a wonderful place to unpack the meaning of the 10 Commandments. I gave it exceedingly high praise. That doesn't mean, however, that I think it's perfect. In the exposition of the 7th commandment, the Westminster Larger Catechism says, the sins forbidden in the 7th commandment, that is, the sin against adultery, or the prohibition against adultery, the sins forbidden in the 7th commandment, besides the neglect of the duties required, are adultery, fornication, rape, incest, sodomy, and all unnatural lusts, lascivious songs, books, pictures, dancings, stage plays, and all other provocations to or acts of uncleanness, either in ourselves or others. Does this mean that it's a sin to act in a play? Well, before I answer that, let's do a little grammar here. The question we have to ask is, does the word lascivious apply to songs, books, pictures, dancing, stage plays? I'm going to say yes, because certainly the Puritans would not take the view that books were wrong. So it's lascivious stage plays that they forbid. Now let me see if I can make that a little bit clear. It looks, while it may look like the Westminster Divines are saying that it's a sin to act, I don't think it is. One of the things you need to notice here is that this condemnation comes in the context of the 7th commandment rather than the 9th commandment. When Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount began to unpack the commands of God, he did well, he did right, he spoke the truth when he was expanding their understanding. The same thing is true of our fathers, the Westminster Divines, who were trying to expand or expound on the fullness of this command. The prohibition against adultery goes well beyond what happens when a married person sleeps with someone that's not his or her spouse. It would certainly include participating in pornography, whether producing it or partaking of it. And that may be why they seem to suggest, anyway, that it's always wrong to act in a stage play. But, friends, it's not just possible, but likely that stage plays in that era, all the stage plays in that era, were given to the body the suggestive. That, however, is not the essence of a stage play. You can have stage plays that are not lascivious. Stage plays can be any number of things. When I was a boy, my church put on a production of It's Cool in the Furnace, a retelling of the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It wasn't presenting anything in the least bit bawdy. It was, however, presenting a stage play. Well, perhaps the issue our forefathers had with stage plays was the dishonesty inherent in them. Actors pretend. And I suppose one could argue that pretending is a species of lying. If, however, such were their concern, I would think that the prohibition would have been covered under the heading of the 9th commandment rather than the 7th. But more important than that, we need to remember that no one watching a stage play is under the impression that what they're watching was, quote, true. Now, before you declare gotcha, keep in mind that in the same way that the stage play is untrue, so is the parable. If one is a sinful lie, so is the other. Now, maybe none of you are in any danger of embracing this view that it's sinful to act in a stage play. But I do want us all to be more thoughtful about what we take in and what we put forth. We're likely, I suspect, benumbed by the low standards of the broader culture. But there are options. I remember watching the end of Fireproof, where the Kirk Cameron character kisses the character of his wife, and knowing that it was set up and framed in such a way that it was actually Kirk Cameron kissing Kirk Cameron's wife. I say good on my friends at Sherwood Productions. It's true also that, however, we often try to find ways to slip out from under God's law. But the prohibition is, in the end, clumsy, this one from the Westminster Divines, and actually deleterious to a true love of God's law. Right is right, and wrong, wrong. It is right to expose that which the Bible condemns, that the world affirms. It's wrong, however, to condemn what the Bible does not condemn. Our fathers, to their credit, pushed back against cultural norms. But sadly, here they gave us countercultural norms rather than biblical ones. You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.